Hey guys, what's up? In today's video, I want to go over an interview question that I got recently for a web developer role. And basically what it was to recreate Trello. Now this is an example of Trello from their website. And basically what it is it's an organizational tool that allows you to create categories of content or items and then add items to those categories and update your team on how far you've gotten, what you're doing, let them post comments and share, and just kind of have this like really nice and easy to use tool to create lists and then add specific information to those list items. In addition to that, you can drag items. You can't do it here, but you're able to in the final version of their product. So my task so the interview question was just to recreate that, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to recreate a really simple Trello dashboard that has 4 different categories for the status of tasks. And what you're going to be able to do is drag and drop them from place to place, but only to their neighbor categories. So for instance, you can't move done to in progress. It has to go to in review first. In review can only go to in progress or done. It can't just jump all the way to open. And then you're going to be able to drag these items and also drop them as we already saw. In addition to that, when you click on the items, it's going to show a little simple modal window and some relevant information to that item. Okay, so this is what we're going to be building today. It's going to be pretty cool. And we're going to be using the React DnD library. Now I know that there's already videos of this on YouTube, but I actually looked through them and I thought they were really complicated. It seemed like they took a really long time, and some of the ways that they were doing the drag and drop was a little messy. So I want to do it with this library first, and then in the next video we're going to go over how to do it natively in just JavaScript without a library. So this is a React library, and basically what it does is it wraps your components, as you can see right here, and injects props into them. So you can just think of it as it providing some pass down context or something like that, and wraps your components with some data, and it gives you that extra functionality to drag, drop, and then collect the final state as you're moving or dragging your components around. Okay, so that's basically an overview of what we're going to be doing. Why don't we go to my React DnD starter. I'll put this link in the description, and we're just going to clone this. Okay. And then we're going to open this up in Visual Studio. Okay, and the first thing you're going to see is this is built off of my Webpack Starter repository. So there's already a lot of stuff in here, like all the style that we're going to be using, because I don't want us to do that on camera. And then it's going to have an app, and then we're going to have some pages for the home page. We're going to have a data directory that has all of the mock data that we're going to use. So that's right here. You can see the statuses, and you can also see the data. And yeah, so it's basically set up really simply like my Webpack Starter. We're not going to go over that. But it's basically a clone of Create React App. Okay, so now that we're ready to start going, I think the first thing we're going to want to do is create some components that our home page is going to use. So why don't we create a new folder called Components. And inside of this, we're going to do our easiest component first. It's going to be called column. And the only thing that this is going to do is it's just going to be a wrapper component for all of the items or the categories, like that in progress, done, and in review. This is just going to be a wrapper for it where we can put content. So we want to know 2 different props. So we want to know the children, and we also want to know whether the item is over this column. So if you're dragging over this column, that's what we want to know. And that's just going to be true or false. So right here, we're going to equal this to column class name, and then we're going to do children. So basically, this is going to know whether an item is being dragged over on top of the column or not. And the reason we have highlight region is because if you look back at our example, it highlights yellow when you're dragging over it. So that's all this component is going to do for us. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is probably the item. So let's look at the item. And this is going to be the actual item right here that you drag over. So as you can see, we have the columns, obviously this silver grayish block, and then inside of it, the white block is the item. Okay, so this is where we're going to actually use the library. So let's do import React. We need to get some things here. We need to get the fragment. We need to get use state and use ref. We need to get use drag, use drop from React DnD. We need to import the window. And this is a file that we haven't created yet, so just sit tight. And then we also need to get something called the item type. And we haven't created that either. So why don't we go into data, and we'll create the types file. And all this is going to be is it's just going to be a constant variable, and this is going to be called item. This is just the type of the drag item. So basically, React DnD requires that you specify the type of the item so that it has a way of distinguishing what kind of draggable item you're working with at the time. And we're only going to have one, but maybe in applications you'll have a few. So that's why you declare a type for them. Okay, and then I also forgot we need to install our dependencies. So why don't we go ahead and do that real quick. Okay, so we need to do npm install React DnD, React DnD HTML5 backend, and then we need React Modal as well because that's what we're going to use to create the window. Those first two dependencies are actually just listed right here, so that's where I'm getting them. And then we're also going to be using this Modal library called React Modal, which is just this right here. And you can look up that. It's really simple to use. It's basically just a pop-up window. Okay, so we're just waiting for this to load, finish installing. Okay, now before we finish the item, there's a couple of things I want to do real quick. So let's just create the header. Sorry, I know we're jumping all over the place, but trust me, these are really easy components. So you really don't even need this if you don't want, but it's just to kind of give the app a nice look and feel to it. Okay, so this is just going to be the header, and all it's going to do basically is just have Trello dashboard on it. So we want to call this row. And then we want to have a p tag inside of it, and this is just going to be called the page header, and it's just going to say Trello dashboard. Now I have some emojis that I've been using. I can't remember what website I got this from, but I'm just going to copy and paste it. The website is actually called getomoji.com, so you can find it here if you want to get those icons, whatever you want to use. They're really nice. You just basically click on it and copy and paste. Okay. So we're just going to do export default header, so we have that. And then we're going to go to our app. And in order to use React DnD, we have to wrap our entire application or section of our app that we're using with the DnD provider. And basically what that is if you've ever used React Context, This is just a way to supply the state that we're going to need in the props and passing the props down to all the different components. So you can just think of this as a wrapper for our entire app that's going to allow us to use that React DnD functionality. This is just something that you have to do. You also have to pass in a backend to it. You can use a separate backend than the one that they provide, but I'm just going to give the one that they provide because I think that's easier. And then we're going to render our header here as well. And I think that looks good. So DnD provider, backend. Okay, perfect. So we're going to get out of that. Now we're going to go back to our item and we're going to finish this up. Okay, so why don't we create our item component? And now the only thing that the item is going to do is it's going to be responsible for moving the item within the container, and then also to the other columns. I think we're going to have to go through it. I can't remember exactly. Let me look. Okay, yeah, so just like I said, this is going to be responsible for moving our item within the same column that we have, or moving it between columns when you actually drop it into place in another column. Okay, so the syntax that they use is they use this comma bracket so that we're only using one variable. And the reason that they do that is just because they don't need whatever the first destructured variable is, so they just put a comma because we're not going to use that variable ever, so we don't need it. So we're going to use the use drop hook that they provide us, and it's going to accept an item type. So this is what we were doing earlier. We only have one item type, so you could really just put whatever you want there. So we're going to do item monitor for when it hovers. Now this is a callback that it's going to call, and I'm just going to basically copy and paste the logic that they have for hovering on another column. You guys can obviously write your own, but I think this is probably the easiest way to do it. So basically, we want to know what the drag index is. So as we click on an item, we're going to assign an index to it, and we want to get whatever that index is. It's also going to, let's see. Yeah, so this index right here is going to be whatever we're hovering over. So whatever column we're hovering over, it's going to give us that index right there. So drag index equals hover index. We're just going to return because we don't want it. So if it's hovering over the same item, then we don't really need to do anything there. So we're going to do hovered rectangle equals ref.current.get bounding client rectangle, and then we're going to do get the middle y. So this is just hovered rectangle.bottom, hovered rectangle.top. And then we're going to get our mouse position, so wherever our mouse is and wherever we're dragging it on the screen. That's a function. And then we're going to get hover client y. Okay, and now we're going to do some checks for whenever we need to return because we don't need to do anything. So if the drag index is less than the hover index and the hover client y is less than the hover middle y, then we're just going to return because we don't need to do anything there. So that's just saying if, yes, let me try to explain this one more time. That's just saying if the drag index, so whatever item index we're working with, we click on an item. If it's less than the hover index, so why don't we just show it right here. So if it's less than the hover index, then we obviously don't need to move it. But if it's more, then we want to move it down. So if it's halfway over the card that it's hovering over, then it's going to pop down. I hope that makes sense. I know that was a really bad explanation at the beginning. Okay, so now if the drag index is over the hover index and the hover client y, so this just checks for the opposite condition if you're traveling upwards. So for instance, if we have this and it's not, halfway over the card on top, then return. put it back in the right place. But if it's not, here, let's put this over here. If it's not, then put it on top. Okay. So we're going to do move item. So this is the callback that we're going to supply, and this is just going to allow us to actually change where the card is in the same column. And then we're going to do item.index equals hover index. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use the is dragging, or we're going to use the use drag hook. So why don't we do this? Now the use drag hook looks a little different, so it needs an item. And the item is going to be an object that we create right here. So we need the type. We need to spread the actual item that we pass in here, so all the data, and then the index that we supply. And then it's also going to use the collect callback. So the collect callback basically gives you a bunch of props and data that React DnD supplies for you. And one of the things is the monitor, which is basically a copy of the screen. So like whenever you're moving your mouse and you're playing with the screen, that's the monitor, and it's going to tell us whether or not we're dragging the item or not. So that's all we need to do right there. And then we need one more variable for show and set show. Let's do useState false. So this is going to be for opening the window and such. When you click on an item, set show is false. And then we're going to wrap drag and drop with the ref that we get. So it's going to give us an actual like way for us to identify and locate the HTML item that we're working with. And you have to do that with the use ref hook because, as you know, React doesn't work with an actual literal DOM. It's a virtual DOM. Okay, so we're going to do ref with the ref. Our style, we're going to do opacity. So if it's dragging, then we want it to be invisible on the actual list. And if it's not dragging, then just make it visible. Class name is going to be item. OnClick equals onOpen. Div class name equals color bar. And then the style is going to be background color, status.color. Okay, and then this is just going to give us that little rectangular color block. Next thing we're going to do is like the actual title of the item. So this is going to be a little darker and a little more pronounced, so it's easier to read. And we get that from the item.content. Next thing we need to do is, I think, the status. Item.status. Now, if you want this to look different, you can obviously do it in whatever way you want. This is just to kind of show it one way that we can do it, and then we also just wanted to make it look like the React Trello, the way that they have it on their website. So I was just kind of trying to copy their style right here. Okay, so then we have the window, and this is just going to show that little pop-up menu. So we're going to do on close, show equals show. Okay, and then we're going to do export default item. Okay. And then I guess what we should do is we should just do the window real quick since we're already working with the item that you drag. So why don't we create a new component, window.jsx, and we can just quick get this done. This is only 28 lines of code, so it's really simple. That's why I wanted to put it in there. So we're going to import React. We're going to import Modal from React Modal. Do modal.setAppElement. And it just needs to get a ID for the root of your app. So in our case, the ID is just the app because we set it up. My Webpack Starter sets it up exactly as the Create React app does. Okay, so we need some, it's going to give us 3 props right here. We're going to pass it the show, whether to show the window, what you do when you close the window, and then the actual item and all of the data associated with that item. So just to kind of show you what the data of each item looks like, it's just this right here. It's we have an array of items, and then we have an object that represents each item. So it's got an ID, an icon, a status, a title, and some content. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create our modal, and this is going to be isOpen. That's going to be equal to our show variable. We're going to do on request close equals on close, and this is just their API and how it's set up. So that's where I'm getting all those prop names from, just following the documentation. And then overlay class name. So what is it going to what is the overlay going to look like when we actually click on the item? So you can see how it's darker right here. That's just what that overlay class name is for. Okay, and then we're going to do div class name equals close button container. Okay, so we're going to have h1 style. We're going to do flex, and this is just going to take up 90% 90% of the row, and then we're going to do h1 item dot. Oh, I need to throw a little closing caret there. All right, and then we're going to have a button for closing it. This is just going to be the X that you see in the top hand right corner, and then on click equals on close, and the button is just going to have an X right there. Okay, and then we're going to have another wrapping div, and this is going to be h2, and then this is just going to be for the other properties of the element, or of the item object. So we're just going to display that. So you can see how easy like this would be to extend if you wanted to add more to the objects and you know, kind of figure out more information that you can display in either a fancier way, or just providing more functionality to this app that we have. And if you want to do that, like adding items and such, you should definitely do that because it'll help you practice for any interviews that you might have in the future, and then also just get a better understanding of how this is working as a whole. Okay, so then we have that, and this needs to be a $sign. Okay, and then we need to do a closing caret there. Okay, and then delete that one. Okay, and then this this fancy like piece of code, or it's not fancy, but that like complicated piece of crap is just to capitalize the status. That's all that's there for. Okay, so that's looking good, and then we're gonna just do export default window. And I think the last thing we need to do now is just the drop wrapper. And this one's actually really simple. We already did we did the hard one, which was the item one. Okay, so we're gonna do the drop wrapper. And what this is gonna do is this is going to be the parent wrapper that encloses the parent component that has the column as a child and the items as children. So you can see that the highlight region right here, this yellow block, is the column, and the drop wrapper is actually this whole thing right here, this whole silver block. And the reason that we have that as the parent component is because we need to have some indication, some idea on whether knowing this column right here, this silver column, is a droppable container so that the items can actually move between it. as such. Okay, so why don't we import the rest of our functionality? So we need to use the drop hook again. We're going to do import item type from data/types. Import statuses from our data folder. Okay, so we're going to do the drop wrapper, and this is going to be on drop children and then status. Okay, and we're going to do const, and then we're going to destructure out some stuff here. So it gives us an object as the first variable, but we only need that first or that is drop property from the object. So that's why I destructured it right there. We're going to use the use drop hook. So again, remember, it accepts an item type. You always have to supply that. The item and the actual, so the draggable element and the droppable element, they have to accept the same item type, or it will always reject it. So for instance, if this item right here was of item type red, and the droppable column was of item type zebra or something, and they don't match in that case, then it would just reject it every time like this. It wouldn't let you drop it. But since the item types are the same, we can just drop it right here. So that's what that accept property is for. So now we can do can drop item monitor. So this is just a can drop hook or callback. Sorry, not a call, or not a hook, a callback. Okay, so we need to find the items index. So we're gonna do let's do statuses, and then so status icon. So si.status equals item.status. So I just put si for status icon because if we look at this right here, it has an icon associated with it. Or status item is what I put si there for, just in case you're wondering. Okay, so we need to get the item index because basically when we drag our items over these, drag these items over the columns, the little cards, I need to know what the item index is for the actual item so that we can see whether or not you're allowed to drop it or not, because they have to be right next to each other. So that's what we're doing right here. We're trying to see if the indexes of the columns are right next to each other, if they're like one off or one less, because that's how we're going to either reject the drop or accept it. So I hope that made sense too. I'm like doing awful at explaining this right now, but it honestly should be pretty self-explanatory, I think, when you guys look at the code. Like, I think you'll be able to understand it pretty clearly. Might just take some extra time to look at it since I suck at explaining things. So basically, I created an array right here, and if it includes the status index right here, so if the item index is either 1 greater than or 1 less than, or the already found item index. So if it's equal to the column, you can drop it. If it's to the right of the column, you can drop it. And then if it's to the left of the column, you can drop it. But if it's not any of those, so it's on the opposite side, or it's 2 greater than or 2 less than, then you can't drop it. So I just used includes right there, so we can either get a true or false statement. Okay, so we have that. Now we need a drop callback. So we're going to do drop monitor. Those are the two parameters we're going to set right there. And then we're going to do on drop and the status. Okay, and then we're going to do collect monitor. And then this is just going to tell us whether it's over or not. Oops, let's do that. Excuse me. Okay, so we're going to return some HTML now. It's going to be really simple. So our reference is going to be the drop ref that we created at the beginning. Okay, and then we're just going to do react.clone element. And the reason we're doing this is because we're passing a bunch of children into this parent container. This is basically just a wrapper, right, to tell you whether or not you can drop stuff into this HTML that's within it. And so we're going to use React clone element there because we need to actually pass the props down into the children element. So that's why I use clone element, and then I'm passing the is over prop. Okay, so we have all of that. You can see that we got the is over property from here, from collect, and it's just going to equal a Boolean statement to tell us if we're dragging anything over. And then we also got the ref from that second destruct variable. Okay, so now the very last thing, and then we're going to be able to run this and see if it works, is setting up our home page to actually put everything together. So let's do import item from components item, import the drop wrapper, components drop wrapper, and then import column from the components in the column, and then we're going to import data and statuses from data. Okay, and then we're just going to delete that, and we are going to do const items set items equals use state, and we're just going to copy that from our data structure. So this is just going to give us an array of items that are objects. Okay, so now we want to first set up what our onDrop command is going to do for our items in our state. Because what we're going to do is we're going to like move the indexes of these items. If we look at this right here, so the ID, we're going to move the statuses in the icon, or we're going to change the statuses in the icons as we drop things into different containers. That's how we're going to update these variables. Okay, so statuses.find, we're going to do the status item. So if the status equals the status that we popped in, then, or we need to find the status of the status that is passed into us. So we're going to do prev state, and then we're going to do new items equals previous state dot filter. So get the filter out the item that we're currently dropping. That's what's going to be passed back to us. So filter that one out, and then we're going to add it back into the array. So we're going to get the item, we're going to set the new status, and then we're going to get the actual icon from that mapping that we did. And then we're just going to return our new items. We're just going to use spread. Okay. So basically what we do is we filter out the item that we're currently dropping, and then we set the new status that we got right here, and we set the new icon for the column. I mean, that's how that works, or that's how I chose to do. I just get the item that matches the column, or the status icon that matches the column. Okay, so on move, it gives us, remember, the drag index and the hover index. The drag index is of the items, and then the hover index is whatever item that it's hovering over. So items drag index, so we're going to do set items previous state, and then we're just going to do the same thing that we did before. So we're going to filter out the item that it gives us. So IDX. IDX does not equal the drag index. So whatever item that we're currently working with, that we're currently dragging, let's take that out. And then we're going to insert the new item that is sent to us in this callback. and then we're going to return the new item. So all we did is we filtered out and then we inserted. Okay, sorry, and I actually put this in the wrong place, so why don't we copy and paste and move that down. Okay, return. Okay, so we're going to do row. We're going to do statuses.map. We're going to do return. Okay, so in here we're just going to map through all of our statuses. And what this is going to do is this is going to create the actual columns with the status names in our app. Or in those, sorry, excuse me. It's going to create all of these different columns for the statuses. So we have open, in progress, yada yada. This is just a map function to iterate and create all of those. So we don't have to do it, we don't have to type it out explicitly. We can do it a little more dynamic. So if you wanted to change, you know, the status columns here, or the categories, or what have you, you can do that to fit your needs. Okay. So we have the H2, it's just gonna make it a header tag, so it's a little darker. Obviously, we want it to be darker. Okay, so we're gonna pass the on drop callback here, and then we're gonna pass the status so that it can figure out everything it needs to do in this drop wrapper. And then we're gonna have the HTML content within here. So we have the column, so that gives us the highlight region. And then we're gonna do the actual items. So we're only going to get, this is where it's going to make a lot of sense. So we're only going to show the items in this column that equal the status of this column. So we have filter, and then we have map, so I and then IDX, and we're going to create a item as well from whatever we get back from that filter call. So the key is going to be I.id because we assign a ID to all of our items in our data structure. The item equals I. The index equals the index that we get through from this map call. And then move item is move item, so that's that callback to actually move the item. And then status equals S. Okay, and I think that is all we need to do. So why don't we save here? Let's clear this, and then we can do npm run dev. All right, looks like it compiled successfully. That's good. Let's refresh this. And of course, it craps out on us. I knew that was going to happen. Home page. Let's look at that. Oh, it's because I did not destructure out use state, so we need to get that. Now let's do this. Encountered it with the same key. Okay, so that's not good. So why don't we look at that real quick? Okay, and what we have to do is we had this as status before, but it needs to be s.status to get rid of that key issue. So let's save. Let's refresh. All right, and let's see. Okay, perfect. Look at that. So it looks like everything is in place. Can we drag? Oh, okay. It looks like we might have messed up a little bit. Looks like you can't drag it appropriate. So why don't we open this back up? Okay, and another thing we need to fix is the background color. I messed that up. Just need to capitalize that. Alright, and then the last error we made was a spelling typo. Oh my god, this took me so long to find. Okay, so if you just copy and paste that, ref.current.getBounding client rectangle, and then the last spelling mistake right below it is you can see that we have hovered. It needs to be hovered. Okay, and that should thankfully be the last one. So let's refresh. And now you can move and drag it and drop it just like we wanted to in the demo. Okay, That took so long to find those spelling mistakes. My God. Okay, so I hope this helps just a little bit with how you can do this in a really easy, simple to do way with React DnD library. If you liked the video, please comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you didn't like it, you absolutely hated it, just let me know. Any feedback is welcome. Tell me I suck. That all works too. Okay, thank you, and I'll see you guys in the next video.